Good evening and welcome to the Modise Network. A lawyer who has worked on mining cases for 35 years shares his experiences with us. Richard Spoor is now gunning for the listeriosis class action case. Later on, Amanda Black pays us a visit to speak the universal language of music. Mining has been the backbone of the country's economy for more than 120 years and has defined the politics and character of South Africa. From land dispossession to racial discrimination to establishment of townships to the current financial system, scratch the surface, you will find mining lurking somewhere. Many investors have built their wealth through mining, but many more communities have been devastated as a result. The most recent are the Marikana tragedies and Lily mine deaths. But there has been another slow-moving tragedy: the deaths of thousands of former mine workers who have died from diseases caused by asbestos and gold mining, for instance. But these are difficult to track and require meticulous work to lodge claims. Richard Spoor is one of the dedicated lawyers who work in this space and has had successes in winning class action lawsuits against mining companies, first on the asbestosis case and most recently on the silicosis case. He is what one may call an activist lawyer, and he is with me here to tell me a lot more about his escapades. And please remember to also interact with the show using the hashtag the Modise Network on social media. Richard Spoor, I've been on your Spoor for some time, trying to track you down. Pleasure to have you with us on the show. Thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us. Most recently, I was actually worried when I read that you were arrested at the Xolobeni community meeting, and I thought, we will never get to talk to you and we'll keep on postponing, but ultimately you're here. But let's go back to that meeting. What happened then?
There was on short notice and without consultation, the new Minister of Mineral Resources decided to organize a quick tour of mining communities in KwaZulu-Natal and the Eastern Cape to find out what's wrong so that he can fix the problem and mining can progress. Yeah. Which is a bit of a foolish ambition if you consider that these are protracted, complex issues that have, in the case of Xolobeni, we've been battling this issue for 12 years. But the minister is new to the job. He wants to hear what the people say, and he imagines that once he's heard them, he can unlock the problems and mining can proceed and the country can grow and we'll have jobs and investment. And it's really that kind of context that he went down there, wanting to engage with the community. I've been acting for that community for many years, more than a decade. And I went down to ensure that this process ran well. We found that the process had been rigged. Large numbers of outsiders had been bussed in, speakers arranged on the podium and from the ground about to push a strong pro-mining agenda. And our community, the people whose land it is and who stand to lose their land and their livelihoods if mining takes place, we found ourselves excluded, marginalized, and at one stage cut off by a wall of riot policemen from the meeting. I was asked by the DMR to intervene, and talk to my people.
DMR meaning the Mineral Resources Department.
One of the minister's aides asked me if I would help bring my people under control and stop the shouting and the singing, and if they'd please sit down. To do that entailed, inter alia, persuading the police to please move out of the tent so that people could sit down and participate. And when I approached the police general in charge of this riot police, and asked for his cooperation to work with him, he basically told me he wasn't interested in cooperating at all. He had no interest in working with me, and he didn't care, that I was trying to assist the DMR. That resulted in an argument between himself and myself. And when I tried to appeal to the minister, who I've known for a very long time, I was grabbed by the police, roughed up, and arrested and charged with a range of offences. But I've I was released on warning, and I'm none the worse for the wear.
Sure.
But the meeting was disrupted. The community couldn't participate, and if the minister had hoped to learn anything, it wasn't perhaps the lesson that he hoped to learn.
But as you say, the matter of Xolobeni has been going on for quite a while. Just briefly tell me, what are the issues there? If you are in Joburg or elsewhere in the country, you know that there's something going on there. But there seems to be a difference of opinion between the minister and the department in terms of what should happen with the mining license or rights there. It's an Australian company, right?
Australian company.
And on the other hand, there seems to be a strong sentiment within the community that mining should not take place there. Just briefly, what is the issue?
Well, the community that we represent are the people whose land is going to be mined. That's an enormous patch of land. It's about 22 kilometers long, and it's between 1.5 and 2 kilometers wide.
Yeah.
There are 70 families living directly inside that area, and there are another 150 families living out that area, but whose grazing lands and whose ploughing lands fall inside this area. The mine will have a huge impact on their lives. They'll be moved, they'll lose their land, they'll lose access to the sea, to the fishing, to their grazing, to their crops. It's a huge impact, and that's the one thing that they're concerned about. So they're very worried about their lives being disrupted and destroyed, and the very old linkages of this community with each other. But then it's not as if something is being offered to them. 12 years on, we don't know what they want to do with these people. If my experience is a guide, they are probably going to uproot the people and dump them in some RDP township along the road to Bazana. We don't know. Is the plan to give us alternative land, which would be ideal? There is no alternative land. How are they going to compensate us? We don't know. The BEE structures that they've set up are smoke and mirrors. They're frauds. They don't promote any confidence on our side that people will benefit. People are concerned about an influx of people to get the jobs, people who will get the contracts. They don't believe that this is going to come to them. So really, from their perspective as the owners of the land, as the people whose land this is, there is no reason whatsoever to agree to this mining coming on these terms.
And of course, the information is not forthcoming. And
no.
Probably if it was being shared, it would persuade them to think differently. Who knows?
Who knows?
I say that you are an activist lawyer in the mining space in particular. Am I right to say that? I mean, I'm thinking of the cases I mentioned, the asbestosis case and the silicosis case, the listeriosis case that you're currently working on. But tell me, I mean, was it always like this, that you get involved to the extent that you are?
Well, I mean, as a young man, I was an idealist and an ideologue. But the area where I've been working now for a long time, several decades, has been on mining and two real issues: health and safety of miners and compensation for mine workers, because the history is an ugly one. It's a very dangerous job. People get sick, people die, there are big accidents. And the compensation regimes that govern compensation are now 100 years old, 50 years old. They're old, they're outdated, they're unfair, they're inequitable. So we've been fighting long-term, decades-long battles about compensation and how to improve that. The other thing that's a bit more recent, the last 15 years or so, has involved conflicts between communities and mining companies. So what I see at Xolobeni and how I predict things will flow is based on first-hand experience of what has happened near Burgersfort, where platinum mining took off the last 15 years, Mokopane, where there's also been a massive explosion, and in other places where we have seen what happens when mining companies arrive in a rural community. How does that process unfold, and what are the consequences? And unfortunately, they are nearly always uniformly bad for the people whose land is involved.
So, it leads me to what I said in the intro of this discussion, right? When I said it, to a large extent, defines how South Africa evolved, isn't it? I mean, mining. Yeah. Would you go along with?
Well, I'm personally pro-mining. I think it's tragic how the industry has been, this backbone of our economy has been damaged the last 20 years by poor policy making and poor decision making and hostility on the part of government towards the industry. So I'm not anti-mining at all. I mean, this country's been built on mining, you know, and for better or for worse, Johannesburg wouldn't be here. We wouldn't be one of the most prosperous and successful countries in Africa without it. But there has been this enormous cost. And the real frustration is the lack of any coherent policy framework when it comes to compensation for injuries or disease, or on the engagement in community and mines, on how to ensure that those relationships do not result in harm and hardship and poverty and the social degradation we see, Rustenburg area, Marikana, Burgersfort, the collapse and destruction of ways of life and people's lives. This government appears not to have learned anything. So if we're looking for lessons, we look outwards, we look at what has happened in other countries, and ironically we look to the IMF and the World Bank and their subsidiaries, who have developed over the years very sophisticated policy documents to govern precisely these kinds of relationships and interactions.
Let me get your view, your opinion on this. On one hand, mining has generated wealth for investors, and up to the point of the development of cities such as Joburg and South Africa's position as an economy on the continent and the world. But at the same time, it has caused serious devastation. What's your view? Why the discrepancy? Why do you think that this wealth did not have a positive impact on some of the communities that you said?
Well, I mean, for starters, most of this history took place under apartheid, where the lives and the interests of black workers and communities was not an issue. In fact, the profits of the mining companies were subsidized. I mean, if you don't have to build people proper housing, having destroyed their homes, if you don't have to replace the land you destroy, if you don't have to compensate them for the diseases that you cause and the injuries that you inflict upon them, well, it means bigger profits. So really, sustainable mining requires the mining companies, first of all, to pay for the harm that they do and make sure that they square up on that, and anything else is profit. But mining companies want to mine as cheaply as they can.
With the help of the successive governments.
And the governments have helped them. You know, and this government's response, you'd expect huge changes, hasn't resulted in fundamental and informed and intelligent policy changes. So, you know, mining involves land, and mining involves land rights. So you would imagine that one of the key players here is the Department of Land Affairs. And you'd imagine that the DMR, the mining authorities and land affairs, would have some close relationship, work out policies, work out how to do things. There is nothing. There's a vacuum. There's a void. So to the extent that at certain areas and certain places we've been able, through representing communities, to secure better deals, fairer deals, it helps. It has happened despite government. So there's no support. So even when we have a good relationship with a mining company, they're willing to work with us. We want to work with them. Where is government in this process? It's absent. It plays no role.
Richard Spoor will pick up the conversation in a moment and talk about the cases that I mentioned earlier on, the asbestosis case, the silicosis case. Listeriosis is also on the agenda. Lawyer Richard Spoor continues the conversation with me after the break.